This episode is brought to you by Microsoft Azure. Turn your ideas into reality with an Azure free account. Get everything you need to develop apps across cloud and hybrid environments, scale workloads, create cloud-connected mobile experiences, and so much more. Discover what you can create with popular services free for 12 months. Learn more at azure.com. That's AZURE.com. And sign up for a free account to start building in the cloud today.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Cancelo, oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah, and still Salah, oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne, and it is Ward-Prowse, Martinelli, gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tadiwa Chanakira, and his guest, Jake Jackmann.
It's game week 3, and you know what that means. It's time for another brand new episode of A Tad Predictable. I am your host, Tadiwa Chanakira, and I'm joined by a resident A Tad Predictable guest, Newcastle fan Jake Jackmann. Jake, welcome back onto the show. I saw you. You were basically the Jon Snow gif, where you were taking on all comers with regards to Newcastle's transfer activity or lack thereof this off season so far.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite all comers. I don't think I've got that many people talking to me, but yeah, it's been. I've had some engagement, but yeah, good to be back on the show.
Well, we're happy to have you back on this show. Obviously, we're going to be going through all of the fixtures coming up in game week 3, and then obviously halfway through, we will ask Jake to give us sort of a state of the nation address of this current situation at Newcastle, how he feels about it, and the season ahead for them. But Jake, we start off game week 3 with a really exciting fixture. Arsenal will be entertaining Brighton, a Brighton side that have started off in a very promising fashion, many would say. Obviously, going up against an Arsenal side, we all know the aspirations for them. This is the season where many believe they'll finally get it over the hump and win that title away from Man City. How do you see this game shaping up? And do you think this is the game of the weekend? I know there's a couple of big games on Sunday, but I think in terms of pure football enjoyment, this could be right up there.
Yeah, it's going to be a good game. I do think that Brighton, under the new manager, might not be quite as good as to watch as they were under De Zerbi. I did think the Manchester United game last week, but they had some good chances. It was quite an even game, and I didn't feel they were quite at their sort of aggressive, quite as aggressive as they were under De Zerbi, but obviously that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. They won the game, 2 wins from 2, same as Arsenal. So yeah, you've got 2 teams coming into this game with 2 wins on the board. I think that's probably going to be the only time we see that over the weekend. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to watch. You got to say, if Arsenal are serious about winning the league, they've got to win their home games. This is one they've got to win. Although they've got 2 wins on the board at the moment, they have shown a few fragile signs in both those games. I thought Wolves had a few chances at the Emirates. Raya made one good save in particular. Then obviously last week, Ollie Watkins had a couple of chances. One another great save by Raya. So they've been giving up a few chances. They've not quite been as convincing as perhaps their fans would like to see. But it's early in the season. Still a bit of ring rust. And yeah, if you're winning the games, it's the most important thing. This should be a good game. It's going to be a good early kickoff. Worth getting into the pub early for if you're be going to a game on Saturday and wanted to go and watch an early kickoff for, yeah, it'd be a good one to watch. I'd probably give Arsenal the preference. I think at home they should have enough to win. Although Brighton won last weekend, I did think Manchester United sort of controlled a lot of the game and were a little bit unlucky, really, to go away without anything. I think a draw probably would have been a fair result, but Brighton have also got those attacking players that can create chances out of nothing. But I think they'll be slightly better at home. So yeah, I think on the road here, Arsenal should win. I think I'll go 2-0 Arsenal. That seems to be how they're winning all their games at the moment. So I think 2-0 Arsenal is going to be a common scoreline. I'll go for that.
And as you've said, I agree with you in terms of the defense. For me, I've not been super impressed with them defensively. Obviously, it's still beginning of the season and teams are playing themselves back into fitness and form. But just looking at, how sort of things swing in roundabouts in terms of at the moment, defensively, they should have probably conceded a lot more, but they'll be happy to take the clean sheets and for their sake, hoping that the confidence of those clean sheets, irrespective of how they came about, bleeds well for them rest of the season. Because, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, Jake, if we start hearing the pundits in a couple of weeks' time, if Arsenal keep playing the way they're doing, talking about how mean a defense Arsenal have, irrespective of if you watch the games, they're actually giving away some really decent chances. And Raya's been playing well. He's pulled off some really good saves. And some of the chances, obviously, we saw Ollie Watkins this past weekend. 9 times out of 10, he probably scores both of those chances that he had against Arsenal. But such is the way that the ball is bouncing for them at the moment. And if they are to go and win the league title against a City side that, set the stall at minimum about 90 points, just to get into the conversation, you need stuff like this to go your way, especially early on in the season, just to continue to put pressure on Man City. For me, obviously, my allegiances lie with the Man United Liverpool game, but in terms of just pure football enjoyment, I think I'm probably going to enjoy this game more, especially considering how nervous maybe as a fan you get for your own team. This one, I don't really have a hat in the ring. And it should be two sides that are wanting to play football. I'm curious to see how brave Brighton are with their wingers, who they've been pushing quite high up the pitch in the 2 games that we've seen from them this season so far, and whether or not they keep that going, and if that puts Arsenal under pressure to drop their fullbacks deeper, or if they say, you know what, Brighton, if you stop us scoring and you can counter on us, we're willing to take that risk. But it seems like Arsenal are usually a more conservative team, so I wouldn't be surprised if they are happy to sort of win a game 1-0 in a game like this one. I like your 2-0 scoreline in terms of if Arsenal get an early goal, then they could probably get another one on the counter-attack. But I'm going to go with the conservative 1-0 Arsenal win for this one. Let's move on to Brentford versus Southampton. Southampton finally back in the Premier League. They had the home game last time out. It seemed to me like they were sort of carrying the weight of that, of having their first home game back. I sensed some trepidation or nervousness with some of the passing and the conviction in the decision making or lack thereof, should I rather say. And it kind of bit them when they succumbed to a 1-0 loss to Nottingham Forest last time out. And then obviously Brentford, we know their situation without Ivan Toney at the moment. They look promising in the opening day. Came up against a Liverpool side away from home. Obviously, Liverpool at Anfield is quite strong as it is. And I thought Liverpool handled them reasonably well. I'm assuming for this one, Brentford will be hoping to have a bit more of an influence on the game, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts, because we know Southampton are trying to bring their possession-heavy system that they utilize in the Championship so successfully into the Premier League this season. Do you think Brentford will be happy to allow them to have as much ball as Southampton seem to want to have?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think Southampton played quite well at Newcastle in the opening round of fixtures. they didn't play as well last weekend, and conceded a lot of chances at home to Nottingham Forest, so that would have hit their confidence a little bit. Thought Brentford played really well in the opening game against Palace. They're a little bit fortunate with the result there. I think, they had a disallowed goal, but they created a lot of chances and got a good result there. So you think they're going to be strong at home this year. I think Mbeumo and Visser both looking great form. There's been a few rumours about Visser in the transfer market, so we'll see what happens there. But if he's still there at the weekend, you'd expect him to play. So I think it's going to be a clash of styles. I can see Southampton having a lot of the ball, but Brentford are just so good on the counter attack with Mbeumo, Visser, Sade will probably play. He's very quick as well. Yeah, it'll be an interesting clash of styles, but you have to think that Brentford have more quality, and at home you probably have to back them. So I think I'll go for 2-1 to Brentford here. I'll give Southampton their first goal of the season, but yeah, I think it'll be a 2-1.
A 2-1 to Southampton in that one for you.
To Brentford.
Sorry, to Brentford. Sorry, Southampton fans got a bit excited there. I'm assuming. Sorry, no, 2-1 to Brentford. I've gone 2-0 to Brentford. I don't know if Southampton do get that goal. I still think they need to be slightly more direct. I appreciate they want possession and they that's the style of play that they want to employ. But I think it would help them to be slightly more direct than the methods that they are employing at the moment. And I think with the patient play that they're playing, Brentford will have enough time to get back into position. We saw against Liverpool, the trouble for Brentford came in when Liverpool quickened the pace. And if Southampton are going to play a more laboured approach, I can see Brentford being able to handle them from a defensive perspective quite well and then look to break on them. And Everton fans that were waiting for some of the Everton players that were boarding their train back to Merseyside, obviously that's had a bit of attention on social media. How did you see that situation in terms of, fans maybe being quite vocal about their disappointment in, I guess, Everton's start to the season, and I guess it carries on from last season as well. Maybe they were expecting a fresh start for Everton this season. And then I don't think it gets easier for Everton. It's a home game, so the pressure is going to be on them. But then they come up against a Bournemouth side that you'll be quite familiar with, having played them recently. Semenyo looks decent.
Yeah, it's still the Everton. Obviously, it's a bit crazy to see those scenes with the supporters so early in the season. And you can't imagine that would be good for the players. So yeah, you can't imagine that's a good thing. But it always seems to go through these cycles for Everton, and they normally find a way to get through and stay up. But yeah, it's gonna be another interesting game. I think they always are at the start of the season, but Everton at home, they really need something to sort of kickstart their season. They've got a Carabao Cup game in the week, so maybe that could give them a little bit of positivity and momentum going into this game. Bournemouth were very good last week against Newcastle, probably unlucky not to get the result, but they were pleased with their performance and to take 2 points from their first two games. They'll be looking for that first win and coming up against this Everton team in the form they're in at the moment. Probably think it's a good opportunity to get it. But yeah, difficult. I think one thing that Bournemouth did struggle with last week was when Newcastle did bring players on late in the game and they got crosses in, and Dan Burn and Joel Linton both had good headed opportunities. Obviously, the goal that they conceded came from a cross into the box, and you probably say that's Everton's strength if they get Dwight McNeil on the ball, putting in crosses with Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto both quite good in the air. Maybe they'll have a little bit of luck that way, and it's obviously a style that Sean Dyche won't be afraid to go to. So I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 here. I think that this physicality of Everton might help them get something from the game. But if I was to decide for one or the other, I'd probably say Bournemouth was the more likely winners. But yeah, I'll go 1-1.
That should make for quite an interesting game, as we said. It'll be interesting to see if that happens, how the Everton fans take that, and I guess it will depend also what they go in at halftime with. They seem to be quite vocal at the moment. Understandably, I think they're a club that the fans would have been expecting to have a really good season, draw a line in the sand of the financial issues that plagued them last season, draw a line in the sand, head into this season, look to reestablish themselves as one of the teams that are mainstays in the Premier League. Obviously, they haven't been relegated yet, but I mean, in the sense of they've been close in recent seasons. They've been flirting with that relegation for a while now, and it would have been nice for them to. And there's still plenty of time. We're only 3 games. We will only be 3 games into the season this coming weekend. But it would be nice for them to not have to worry about a relegation battle, especially in the last season at Goodison Park. Yeah, for me, I'm curious to see how they deal with Semenyo. I thought he was quite impressive against Newcastle, and is impressive in the opening day as well. He seems to be the one where everything is moving through Bournemouth so it's good to see that he's happy to take that mantle of being the focal point for the team. I know there's Evan Nelson that's come in as well. From an Everton perspective, Jake, just one thing. I know obviously at the beginning of the season in our Reckless Predictions podcast that myself and Guy Drinkle did, I predicted that Everton would not score from a set-piece goal. Penalties don't count, mind you. By game week 16, that they would not have scored from a set-piece goal. Are you in my camp on that one, or do you think I'm going to fail horribly? I mean, I've gone 2 games so far, so it's looking promising.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's not happened yet, so until it happens, you're in with a shout, aren't you?
I hope so. I thought it was quite a good one. But yeah, for this one, oh man, I would love Everton to get their train back on the tracks, but I just feel like Bournemouth are playing some good football at the moment. Yes, as you mentioned, susceptible late on in games. Newcastle grew into the game, and we'll obviously speak about Newcastle a bit later on. And Bournemouth started to really struggle in that game. But I liked what I saw from them at the beginning. I liked the build-up play, the pressure they were putting on Newcastle. We saw pressure put on Pickford in the last game against Tottenham, and he made a mistake that led to the Son goal. If Bournemouth come with that same level of pressing pressure, Everton need to be alert in that one. But yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-1 Bournemouth win. I think Bournemouth are going to have enough. And as I said, I'm sorry to continue to pour cold water on Everton's season, but hopefully they fix things and get the train back on the track. As I mentioned, let's move on to Ipswich versus Fulham. Now, I mean, Ipswich had a baptism of fire, Jake. They had Liverpool and then Man City in the Premier League. Now they've got a home game against Fulham. Again, showcasing how tough the Premier League is. Because you look at it and you're thinking, oh, finally we get a bit of respite from some of the bigger teams. But Fulham are looking decent in recent games. Emil Smith Rowe got on the score sheet, which was great to see for him and his revival, if you can call it, of his career. How do you see Ipswich handling this one? These are the type of home games where, yes, it's tough, but you need to start picking up points in these games if you, want to stay in the Premier League, and 2, want to start to get some sort of momentum going.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the big game for Ipswich. It's definitely one that they'll have they're penciled in as a potential win for them at home. I think Fulham are a good Premier League team now. They've established themselves here. Michael Silver's done a good job, but they're still, I wouldn't say they're a top half team. So they're definitely the types of teams that are home that a newly promoted team needs to try and beat. I thought Fulham weren't that great in their first game against Manchester United. They had a few, and looked a little bit lost in possession, had a few chances to break and didn't quite capitalise. Better last week, obviously getting the win against Leicester, but it wasn't quite the convincing victory that many expected them to get. So going to be a big game for them. Also, signed a couple of players. Joachim Andersen coming in is going to be very important. He's a very good defender, but also very good on the ball at launching attacks and playing through the line. So he's going to be a good addition there. Ipswich have made several signings. A lot of the players they signed have been from the Championship, like the Sammy Schmodic, Jack Clark. Been linked to a few more today. I think I saw Bene from Luton was linked. So they seem to be sort of signing the best of the Championship to then try and stay in the Premier League. But if they don't achieve that, be well set to come back in the first attempt. So it'd be interesting. Obviously, I think they come off with a similar sort of attitude to Luton. I think a lot of people are saying they might stay up and they're giving them the best chance out of the three purely just because of the good mood factor. But at some point, you need substantial result on the pitch. They had a good first half against Liverpool. Obviously, did the lead against City, but we've not really seen them up against a team where we can learn about them as a potential Premier League outfit. So yeah, it'll be a really interesting game for the neutral to see how Ipswich do. And I think I might give them the win here. I'm still not convinced they're going to stay up, but I think they're going to get a lot of points early. I think once the Premier League sort of beats you down over that January, sort of Christmas, January period, it can become a bit of a slog. But at the moment, they'll be buzzing, the fans will be up for it, the players will be excited. They'll still have that sort of confidence from coming up to the Premier League, and I think that'll be enough to get them a result here. I think I'll go 2-1 to Ipswich.
Interesting. Yeah, hopefully they get their first win. Jake, my other prediction on that show that I mentioned with Guy earlier on for my end of season one was that Ipswich stay up. I've drunk the Kool-Aid, Jake. I'm a firm believer in Ipswich. I'm pushing for them to be the team of a tad predictable this season that we root for. Obviously, during the preseason when I did the preview podcasts of each of the Premier League teams heading into this season, when we did the research for Ipswich and looking into them, I fell in love with them, Jake. I think they're doing things the right way off the pitch. I think they're trying to do things the right way on the pitch as well. But as we know, the Premier League can be really cruel, and you can do all the right things, but if you're not getting the results that you need to, things can go horribly wrong for you. I mean, we've seen Norwich come up and play good football and head straight back down before. Hopefully for Ipswich, that's not the sake. I'm going to throw in the good vibes towards Ipswich and follow suit with your 2-1, and hopefully both of us predicting that will send good vibes towards that match, and it turns out that way. But yeah, in terms of Fulham, I think I was a bit disappointed with them at the beginning of the transfer window, but they seem to be getting their act together with some really interesting signings. Obviously, Anderson has come back as well. I think Sander Berge might add some physicality into that midfield. As I mentioned, Smith Rowe is a good signing for them. I was one of those people that was asking for Arsenal to free him so we could actually see him playing week in, week out, and hopefully he enjoys his football at Fulham. But yeah, for the sake of my prediction and for Ipswich, from a long-term perspective, I'm going to go 2-1 and hope that they can get their campaign off to a good start. If you can say, considering the two teams that they played before, I think it would have been very, very difficult for them to get any results in those two games. But this is a game at home, as we're saying. They have to start picking up not just points but victories along the way in order to stay up. Leicester, another promoted team, they will be entertaining Aston Villa. Is this playing a wounded animal in Aston Villa, a cornered animal, considering they probably could have taken the lead against Arsenal and made it a bit more of a game in terms of scoreline? Obviously, Arsenal went on and won that game 2-0, but Aston Villa were in that game. They were in the conversation, had chances to go and draw it or potentially win that game. Coming up against the Leicester side who faced the aforementioned Fulham. They lost 2-1 to Fulham in that one. Iwobi scoring late on there. Jake, for me, the teams that have come up, I don't know why, but Leicester are the ones I'm more worried about. Maybe for a lot of people, it's Ipswich that they're more worried about. But because I've drunk the Kool-Aid for Ipswich, by default, it had to be either Southampton or Leicester. I'm slightly more worried about Leicester, despite Southampton's glaring issues that I've mentioned in terms of wanting them to be more direct. I just feel like for Leicester, things haven't always gone their way in terms of, them losing their manager, losing their key talisman midfielder. positive result against Tottenham, where they obviously played a lot better in the second half of that game. We saw spells of them in this game against Fulham where they can cause teams issues. But yeah, for me, they're the ones that I'm most worried about of the promoted teams.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Obviously they lost their manager as well, which is never a good thing when you come up to the Premier League. I think they've appointed somebody good in Steve Cooper. He's he sort of has done a similar job before for us with a lot of upheaval and managed to keep them up. And they've got a player in Jamie Vardy that scores goals in this league, so you've got to sort of respect the squad. They've still got a lot of players that have played a lot in the Premier League, like the Pereira, Justin, and a few more. Obviously, Fast was there last time they were in the Premier League. They've still got Connor Cody. They've got a lot of experience. So yeah, you'd have to hope that they can sort of have enough to be competitive. But yeah, it's difficult not to worry about them. Going back down again, purely just the lack of quality they have. Losing Dewsbury Hall was a big one. They sort of looked okay against Tottenham. Once they got the goal, they seemed to have found their feet and they pushed on and looked like the more likely winners on that day. But yeah, against Fulham, it was kind of a bump back to reality, and sort of a reminder that just how difficult it is going to be for them in this league. Aston Villa have had a good couple of years under Emery. They're obviously going to be in the Champions League, so we don't know how that's going to impact them, but obviously it won't have an impact yet. You probably think if Leicester put out a similar performance to the one in the first half against Tottenham and again against Fulham last week, that Villa should be the likely winners. So I think I'll go for 2-0 here to Aston Villa.
2-0 to Aston Villa seems about right to me. I think, yeah, Leicester are yet to put two halves of football together in the same game, and I worry for them in this one. As I hinted to earlier on, the whole wounded animal effect, I think Aston Villa try and make a statement here. I think they go and win this 3-0. Ollie Watkins will be looking for blood after the misses that he had against Arsenal, and I don't think he misses chances if they're presented in the same fashion, as often as he did against Arsenal, and I'm sure he will be really, really keen to course correct there. Jake, obviously we've reached the halfway point of the podcast. This podcast is presented by EPLindex.com in association with our presenting sponsors, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. You guys can check out their services at libertyshield.com. If you use the coupon code EPL25, you can get 25% off of your router or the software VPN. I'm going to allow you to gather your thoughts. I don't know how you want to attack this. I'll leave it in your capable hands, but we'll go to a short break and then we'll be back with Jake as we do a Newcastle State of the Nation address.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
All right, we are back. Jake, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I was keen to get you on, especially in this last sort of week of the transfer window, because you are a fan of one of the clubs where the transfer window has been sort of a huge talking point. The whole debate of, the PSR rules, and then obviously once that hurdle was crossed, it was almost expected that Newcastle would now go and attack the window. It's not quite worked out maybe as some fans would have been hoping for, but I'm curious what you think of the state of Newcastle at the moment, Newcastle going into the season, what we can expect from them, and maybe what you're hoping for.
Yeah, it's been a difficult summer. Started off with the PSR stuff, which went on into June, which ultimately led to Elliot Anderson leaving and Jan Mints going to Brighton, which was a little bit disappointing because they're two of the better young players we had, but sort of needs must there. I think how that was ultimately managed led to Amanda Staveley and her husband leaving the club. I think I don't think that was planned. I think it was a consequence of the situation the club were in through PSR because they were sort of the day-to-day managers of the club. So now we've moved on from them, and we've got Paul Mitchell as the sporting director and Darren Eales as the CEO. And it seems that they've sort of been given carte blanche to run things how they want. With obviously some oversight from Saudi Arabia, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's disappointing. Obviously, all the rumours about Isak and Bruno and Gordon towards the end of June were quite unsettling. And you can kind of see the lingering impact that's had on the team in the first couple of games. We don't quite look the same team as we did last season as we ended it. We obviously ended it in, well, not in great form, but in stronger form. We found a little bit of consistency, and we're kind of just unlucky that Chelsea sort of won their last 5 games to finish above us, and then Manchester United beating Manchester City in the cup sort of meant we weren't in Europe. I don't think either of those things were considered that likely going into the last couple of months of the season, but then both to happen was just quite unfortunate. I don't think a team in the last 10 years that's finished 7th in the Premier League and not got European football, so you can put that one down to bad luck, but it kind of just summed up the season. Without of injuries we had, obviously Tonali's suspension, and the cup draws, we seem to be drawing, City, and we drew City in both cups, knocked them out of one, but we knocked out the other by City. So yeah, we had a lot of bad luck last season. But, that's the way it is sometimes. We finished 7th, had something to build on, and I think most people were expecting this summer to be one where we did really push on, that we moved players out. The likes of Trippier and Almiron and Wilson would be moved on, and we'd sort of lower the average age of squad, bring in a few first team signings and really push on without European football to try and get back into the Champions League. But that's not really happened. We've got pretty much the same squad. We've signed Lloyd Kelly, who's probably not going to be much more than a squad player. A young striker from Sheffield United, which is kind of just a needs must. If you're going to go on with Isak and Wilson for another season, you need another player, because Isak and Wilson have both been susceptible to injuries, so they've got somebody in there. And it seems that for the club now, the transfer market is going to sort of, it'll do or die based on what happens with Mark Gahey. That's the one they've gone out for. It's been an endless saga so far. It's been going on for quite a few weeks. We've had Steve Parish out in the press talking about it. We've had Newcastle consistently briefing that they're confident it's going to happen. Over the last 24 hours, it does seem it's slowly getting there, and it's probably going to happen before the deadline. But until it happens, it can't expect it to. So wait to see. That old cliche. Wait to see him holding the shirt. But until that happens, yeah, we're kind of completely reliant on that. If it does happen, it'll probably be a club record signing, and I think it'll probably be the most amount of money spent by a Premier League club on a single player this window, depending what else happens. But at the moment, it would be surpass what Tottenham paid for Solanke. So, it's going to be quite, and for some, even that's not going to be enough. They still think that we need a right winger, which is probably true. We're going to go in with Almiron again, and Jake Murphy. Neither of them are quite up to the standard we're looking for. But maybe they'll decide to switch Gordon to the right wing and play Harvey Barnes more. That's sort of how we ended it at Bournemouth. That might be one temporary solution. But yeah, I think there's just general malaise in the fan base, a lot of unhappiness. Sort of expected us to push on, and it's not quite happened for whatever reason. But yeah, we'll see what happens over the next few days. We might see some surprising things happen, but yeah, at the moment it does look like it's going to be Mark Gahey or nobody, and it'll be, if the club failed to get that transfer done, it'll be interesting to see the fallout, because there'll be quite a substantial one. I think there'll be that is the absolute minimum they need to get that done, and yeah, even then, a lot of people won't be happy with just that. But it's going to be quite a unique situation where a club can break their transfer record and fans can still be underwhelmed. there we go. But yeah, with the first couple of games, they're two games where, we got 4 points. It's not a bad outcome. Spurs, who we'd probably see as similar, and Manchester United have had similar games, sort of a home game and an away game against teams, that are going to be outside that top 8. And Manchester United have taken 3 points, and Spurs have taken the same amount of points as us. So, in that regard, we're probably up on the pace, but we didn't play well in either game. Against Southampton, we were quite poor and laboured. Obviously had the man sent off, but then to get out of that with 3 points, you can't complain. And then Bournemouth, we didn't play well for probably the middle 50 minutes of the game. But substitutions changed it, and we did have sort of a 20-minute spell where we looked quite good. Probably looked like the more likely winners at 1-1, but then Bournemouth went up and got the goal that was somewhat controversially disallowed. Yeah, once that happens, once you see your team concede the goal in the last minute, and then you can still come away with a point, just because even though it's a VAR intervention, you've got to take that. Still be relatively happy. Eddie Howe's teams have quite often started slow. I think we were sort of, I think even the season we finished 4th, we'd only taken like 10 points from our first 8 games or something, so we did start slow that season. And we pushed on and got into the top 4. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I think Newcastle will improve. I think the transfer window shut is going to be a massive boost for the squad, just to get that, knowing exactly who's going to be there. So kill all the noise that's outside at the moment and really focus on the football. I think that's going to be a benefit. Yeah, I'm still relatively optimistic about the season, but I can understand why there's a lot of unhappiness as well. But I choose to be positive. We'll see where we end up. It's not quite as simple as if we went and bought 3 players that we definitely finish in the top 5. We know we could equally sign nobody and get that, or we could have signed 3 players and had a bad season and ended up 10th. Nothing's guaranteed. There's still a lot to be written, and yeah, we'll see where we end up on Friday. Hopefully, we've signed at least 1 player to improve our starting 11. And yeah, I think if Mark Gahey does sign, if Mark Gahey signs and we progress in the cup against Forest on Wednesday, and we go into the Tottenham game and get a positive result there, I think all the positivity comes back again. But it is quite a big week. We need to do something in the transfer market, and we need to, at the very least, progress in the cup. I think that's a really winnable cup for us with the extra games in Europe. The teams that are in those competitions are probably not going to care about the Carabao Cup even less than they usually do. And out of the teams that are not in Europe, you'd probably say Brighton, Newcastle, and West Ham are the strongest 3 teams that are not. So we've got a real good opportunity to target that cup competition and try and get that silverware. Because if it gets to the point in February, we're in that cup final, we win it, our season is instantly a success. So I think it's definitely something we need to target. So that's a big game for us on Wednesday. We need to get a signing in, at least 1. And yeah, hopefully then things will start to improve. But it's been a tough summer.
A tough summer indeed. Well, what you ended off with there with the Carabao Cup, I hope that Eddie Howe and his staff are intentional about it. We've seen managers in the past, but we all know every single team wants to win every single tournament that they enter. But I really do hope that the Carabao Cup almost takes precedent over the Premier League performances this season, because I don't think Newcastle will be in dire straits if they finish 10th in the league, for example. I don't envision that happening. But let's say, for argument's sake, they end up finishing 10th, but they do win the Carabao Cup. I think that trophy coming in will be more important to them than the league finish. And then you build from that. I think the Champions League campaign last season was good to come in. I thought you guys came in a season too early. But you were there, and I thought you gave a good account of yourselves, and lucky in some of the games there. I think for me, not as much credit is being given to the fact that Newcastle retained a lot of the players that they wanted to. Obviously, Minter is a big one in terms of, arguably, he's a player you wouldn't sell if you didn't have to, based on the financial implications that were surrounding that situation. But everyone else, it could have been a very tricky situation if you have like a Bruno Guimaraes, if you have an Isaac saying, look, we don't have Champions League football. I came here to play Champions League football. I want to leave. I didn't get that sort of sense. I didn't even get a hint of that sort of sense from any of the Newcastle players. No disgrumblings or discontent or rumors regarding that. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I like that fact. I think that's promising that all the players were willing to say, okay, this is our situation. We're happy to stay. We'll go again next season, and we'll try and fix the things that we didn't get right. So yeah, not enough credit I think is being given to that aspect of it, of being able to retain everyone that they wanted to bum into, as I mentioned. In terms of bringing players in, I do think a defender is, especially with the injury issues you guys have suffered in defense in recent times. I think it's a massive need for you guys. I'm surprised that Newcastle went in for Joe Gomez, who obviously Liverpool know is wanting to leave, but it could be that the Guehi signing frees up a slot for Crystal Palace to go for Gomez, so he could end up being the replacement for Guehi. But I would have thought he would have been quite good at Newcastle, especially because he can almost play, well, he can play everywhere across the back line. And he would be a great utility player. But yeah, those are sort of my overarching thoughts. Do you think enough attention has been given to the players that have been retained? And what are your thoughts on a potential Joe Gomez? I know it's unlikely, but I think that could be a break glass in case of emergency if the Guehi finances don't get sorted out.
Yeah, keeping holding players got to be objective one. I think the majority of the fan base and probably even the owners and the club were expecting Bruno Guimaraes to go this summer.
Yeah.
I think they kind of left the finances in a way that they expected somebody to come and activate that release clause, and when that didn't happen, that led to sort of the panic in the last few days before the PSR deadline. So that was slightly of a surprising one. But there's not been big fees spent on players this summer across the Premier League. We've not seen it. Solanke, I think, is the most expensive player signed this summer. I just don't think there's just the appetite to do those massive transfers. We might see it again in future years, but I think they're going to become rarer. Because how often does a club spend that amount of money on one player and it become a success? It is quite rare. So, and the amount of money that's in Premier League clubs now, if you don't have that release clause, it can be so difficult to get these key players out, as we're finding with Mark Guehi. I think if it would be difficult for a club to sign Alexander Isak. I think it would probably, you'd be starting with at least 100 million, and it'll probably be more than that. So how many clubs, one, would want to do it, and two, can even do it? So I think it's going to become more common for players to get locked in at clubs. It's obviously good to keep them for us. We could have, lost one of them this summer. Obviously, Anthony Gordon to Liverpool was one that was rumoured around the PSR deadline, has kind of been kept on social media, but it's always felt very, very unlikely once that deadline passed. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future windows, but I kind of think it's going to become more common. Elise was sort of taken from Palace purely because he had the release clause. Maybe we're going to find more and more players make sure they have that sort of security or the release clause. It's kind of why the Mark Guehi sale was quite important to Palace, because for all intents and purposes, he wants to go. He doesn't have a release clause. If Palace want to market themselves as that club that you could come into, do well, and be sold onto, they have to show that willingness on their side to sell a player on. Kind of, it's always felt to me if they don't agree to that deal with Newcastle, if the fee, it does seem like the fee is now within a couple of million of the asking price. If they don't show that sort of willingness to compromise on their side, when they next go for a player like an Eze or an Elise from another club, will they want to come in without the security of a release clause? Probably not. So you have that pressure on both sides. But yeah, I think for Newcastle, I'd always expected Isak and Gordon to stay. Bruno was one I was expecting to go, but it's good that he stayed. Yeah, it's always good to keep your players first and foremost. But when you have quite the public ambition that Newcastle owners have shown, some of their statements, keeping your players isn't enough. Standing still in the Premier League is going backwards these days. Everybody knows that. So it's quite important they do get that first team signing. But I kind of think they're also in the place where if they can't get the player they want, they'd rather get nobody at all, which is understandable. Somebody like Joe Gomez, he would, he'd do a job. He'd be a good signing in the short term, but he's also 27. If you're going to spend, I don't know, for argument's sake, 40 million on him, probably 100,000 a week in wages. Is that really the best way to improve your squad? Maybe he improves Newcastle in the short term, but is he still starting in 2 years' time? Maybe not. So, I kind of agree with their standpoint. If they can't get the players they want, it's better to get nobody. But it's kind of important they at least get one player they want, and we've not seen that yet. So hopefully that gets sold in the next couple of days, and Mark get who signs, because at least that would be something.
Yeah, and it's one to keep an eye on if there aren't any signings, or I guess even if there are signings, we've seen how ruthless the owners can be in terms of if you're not delivering, we could get rid of you from an off the pitch perspective. I don't think that would extend to Eddie Howe quite yet, but maybe the guys higher above him, if they've come in and it's not been successful, I don't know. It's one to keep an eye on. But Jake, let's move on to the rest of the fixtures for this coming weekend. There's Nottingham Forest versus Wolves. I mean, Wolves were involved in a game that I wasn't expecting to be as spicy as it ended up being against Chelsea on the weekend, and it obviously the sparks were lit off with the post that Nuno Madueke made, and then subsequently deleted. But they end up losing that game quite emphatically. They come up against a Nottingham Forest side who gritted out a narrow win over the weekend. Two teams that I think will be hoping to be sort of in the mid-table conversation this season if everything goes right for them. How do you see this one shaping up?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a great game. I kind of think that Forest aren't going to be great to watch this year. But at home, it feels like quite an important one. At the start of the season, a lot of people were sort of touting Nuno as perhaps being the first manager to go, but he's got 4 points in his first 2 games. If they can follow that up now with another win against Wolves, it'll put them in a really strong position going into that first international break. They'd be well ahead of schedule. Their aim is probably to stay up again. Nothing wrong with that. That's their first aim, and to be they managed to get 7 points into that after 3 games. They'd be well on their way to achieving that. And sort of building that positive momentum at the start of the campaign. I think the momentum is so massive with football. If you start a season poorly, you're always chasing your tail, and it's hard to get back onto that. If you build that sort of buffer that you need, you give yourself margin for error in case injuries hit, suspensions hit, form goes out the window, you get that buffer. So it is so important. If Forest be earmarking this one as a game that they probably should win. For Wolves, I thought they played well against Arsenal. I don't think the scoreline was quite a fair reflection of what happened against Chelsea. They were somewhat unfortunate with some of the goals they conceded. But yeah, it's quite a big one to hit, and they kind of already, after losing the likes of Neto and Kilman and not really making any significant signings themselves, they could go into the first international break sort of in a little bit of a crisis. So it's important that they don't go to Forest and lose. I'd expect both clubs to sort of not prioritise their Carabao Cup game in the week, because the league game is far more important for both of them. So yeah, I think Forest have got the slightly better players. The likes of Gibbs White is very good. Chris Wood scores goals in this league. We know what he can do. And they've built quite a good squad. But I think with Wolves, they've lost a lot of that talent. And I'd probably say I'd rather Gary O'Neill was my coach than Nuno, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw here. I'd probably say Forest are the more likely winners, but yeah, I'm going for a 1-1 draw. I think Wolves are going to find something to just at least wrestle back a little bit of momentum, stop the losses, go into the international break with a point away from home and something to build on. And I think if that is the end result, I think Forest will be relatively pleased with 5 points from their first 3 games too. But I kind of think a draw kind of suits both teams. Like I think a loss for either would be more damaging, and normally when that's the case, it normally goes the way of a draw. So I'll go 1-1.
I have a 1-1 draw as well here, Jake. Although I am pleading, if there are any fans, if there are any players of Wolves that are willing to do what Madueke did over the weekend and sort of light a fire on a fixture that we weren't expecting to be as intense as it was, I'm all on board for them trying to do that and replicate that. But obviously you have to then go and score a hat-trick if you do that. Let's move on to a team that has a player who's quite used to scoring hat-tricks, Man City. They will be travelling down to London to play West Ham. Another game in London for West Ham, Jake. This is a club that's not going to be leaving the London area until, they've got a while yet before they leave. I think it's almost November time before they have to leave London. So comfort of, close proximity to home, especially in this one where it is a home game. They entertained the defending league champions, who looked really impressive against Man City. Shaky when they conceded, but never really in doubt, I didn't think, that win in that game. For West Ham, I think impressive to come away from Selhurst Park with the 2 goals and the points. I thought Crystal Palace were well within their rights to get something from that game, but West Ham were far more clinical than they were and saw the benefits of that. I thought Bowen's goal was really, really good. If you're a young, budding forward looking at how to give the keeper the eyes, I think that's a great example of a shot that by all accounts should have been going to the far post, and I think the keeper took a couple of steps to the far post in anticipation, and he then closes the foot at the last second. So definitely go check that one out. But tough home game here, Jake, for West Ham. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a tough game. You'd probably say it's the best time for it. You'd rather play City before, the earlier the better. They're still finding their feet. They've got a few injuries. I think Foden missed out last week for illness, so maybe it's the best chance to play them. West Ham still got that sort of feel-good factor. They made a lot of what are on paper impressive signings. They got the win last week away to Crystal Palace after losing on the opening day. So yeah, the atmosphere will be good at West Ham, but I find it difficult for them to go and beat City. With City's losses, they don't tend to be predictable. So it's very tough to predict the City loss. They sort of just come about. Obviously, Brentford, we've seen beat them a couple of times. Wolves have had positive results. Seen it with quite a few teams, Brighton before. So they are difficult to predict. They sort of just come out of nowhere. So I think I'll go for the City win here. I don't think they're going to score loads. I think it might be similar to the Chelsea game when they sort of just go there, get a couple of goals, do their job, and go home. So yeah, I think it's going to be similar to that. I'll go 2-0. And yeah, for me, City are still the most likely winners of the league. I can't. Their consistency is so good, and they just have gears they can go through that other teams don't. So yeah, I'd go for the 2-0 here. I don't think City's will win.
And it's almost like they don't need to go to those higher gears as often as other teams need to, and that usually allows them to stay quite fresh from a mental perspective heading into the business end of the season. I've gone 3-0 in this one. I do think City will control it. I think they might get a couple late on when West Ham was trying to claw back the game. Let's move on to Chelsea versus Crystal Palace. Obviously, as I mentioned, Chelsea were involved in that Wolves game, that very, very intense, physical, spicy game with a lot more animosity than I was anticipating for that fixture. It ended up being very good viewing for the neutral fans and the Chelsea fans, I'd imagine, as well. For Crystal Palace, Jake, this is the problem when you don't start the season well. Games like this become more and more important. A game that is going to be a tough game, against the Chelsea side who, talent-wise on paper, have a really strong squad, really strong depth as well. For Palace, you have that 2-1 loss to Brentford opening out, and then you go and lose to West Ham. Now you're sitting at the prospects of potentially, having no points from a possible 9 to open the season. And based on the prediction I've given, a 3-1 Chelsea win in this one, that reality does then kick in for Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I think it's going to be another good game to watch at the weekend. Palace have been a little bit unlucky with their results. I kind of feel like they've given as good as they've got in both their games. They could easily. I don't think they dominated either Brentford or West Ham, but they were definitely, they gave as good as they got, and all three results were in play in both those games. They're kind of just unfortunate to take no points. If they played both matches again 100 times, they'd probably come out with at least a point, or if not more often than not. So kind of unlucky, but there does seem to be a sort of a sweeping malaise coming into Palace. Obviously, they've sold Joachim Andersen, they've sold Michael Elise, Jordan Ayew's gone, who's sort of been a consistent player for them down the years, and we've yet to see any real big signings. Eddie Nketiah is sort of rumoured to be coming in, so that would improve the forward line, but with Mateta's form at the end of last season, I don't think a striker was really what we thought Palace needed. Mateta and Edouard seem to be doing a good job, but we'll see where Nketiah fits into that. Obviously, we spoke about Mark Gay in the Newcastle section. He could have left the club by Sunday. It looks more likely than not that he does. Obviously, it's not guaranteed he might still be there, but we'll see with that one. If that does happen, it's kind of imperative they sign at least one centre back, probably two before the deadline swings around. They've gone from being the team that everybody was talking about in pre-season as maybe a surprise team that can maybe push and compete for Europe, sort of finding their feet again and finding a new team, losing two defenders if that does happen, and sort of one of their main creative players in Elise. They're going to be finding their feet again under Glasner, and they'd probably go from aiming for that top 10 to sort of being happy to consolidate in mid-table while they find themselves. It's going to be a tough game. I think the scoreline doesn't quite tell the full story of Chelsea last week. I think it wasn't quite the convincing game that perhaps the scoreline suggested. So it'll be interesting to see how they come up against Palace team who will give them a game. They'll definitely give them a game. Obviously, both teams playing midweek, so that's another factor. I'm kind of going to go for the draw here. I'm going to go for the 2-2. I think Eze is overdue in the league, and I kind of feel he might make a bit of a statement this weekend. And I think Chelsea haven't been great in either. They scored a lot of goals, but still showed some vulnerabilities at the back. And I kind of am doubtful if they're going to be quite as hot in front of goal this weekend. I think there's going to be goals in it. I think Chelsea are still learning the way under Maresca. I think Palace, they might have a completely new back line, at least in the centre-back position. So, I think I'll go 2-2. I'm going to tip Eze to have a good game here. But there's still more questions about both teams than answers at the moment. So, it should be quite a good one to watch.
Yeah, Sunday is definitely going to be a good one in terms of games. Yeah, just a PSA for, to echo what Jake is saying. Anyone that has Eze in fantasy, please don't sell him. He's been very unfortunate not to have returned a lot more points this season. And just for the sake of my own profit of my team as well, it would be great if you guys could hold on to him so he doesn't go down in value. And I'm telling you now, you're going to regret it if you sell him. So that's just one for our fantasy players there. Jake, let's move on to Newcastle versus Tottenham. Obviously, two sides that I think it's fair to say the aims are getting, into the Champions League positions. I know fans might be wanting higher than that, but I think realistically for both teams, getting, 2 seasons in a row of back-to-back Champions League will be a nice base to then go and propel yourselves for a title challenge. Especially when we've seen what Man City demand from teams in recent seasons. But for Spurs, it was a shaky start for them. but a much needed game against Everton, and obviously they came up against an Everton side that's not in great form at the moment. Emphatically beat them 4-0. And then for you guys, obviously you are more adept at speaking on this, but the draw against Bournemouth, as you said, I think at the beginning of the game, I thought Newcastle were a bit sloppy in possession and succumbed to the press a little bit, but they grew into the game. Probably should have been the team that went on to win it. But then obviously we saw that the last minute shenanigans. When it came to VAR, we also saw VAR get involved with the Joe Linton situation. I don't know if you want to speak on that as well. But after the 1-0 win against Southampton, which was, a spirited win against, when you had your backs against the walls, 10 men, I thought Newcastle were going to use that to propel them into the season, but it didn't quite work out that way against Bournemouth. Is this a must-win game as early as it is in the season?
I don't know if it's a must-win game. I think it's too early for that. It's definitely going to be a good game to watch. We've played well against Tottenham at home the last couple of years. We had that game where we went 5-0 up inside the first 20 minutes, and last year Eddie Howe sort of set up differently with sort of a man-to-man formation on Tottenham, and it worked. It sort of showed some of the vulnerabilities in Ange's system, and we got quite convincing win that day as well. So if Tottenham will be definitely coming with a bit of a point to prove. They'll be looking to sort of right the wrongs of the last 2 years. So it's a dangerous fixture for Newcastle, really. But there were some things I saw in Tottenham's game against Leicester that kind of gave me reason to think they may find similar difficulties this year at St James's Park. It did seem the moment sort of Leicester went up at them and sort of got into them, they did look really unsettled. And they'll be coming up against that at the weekend. I don't know how much you can buy into that Everton result because of how bad Everton were. And yeah, I think towards sort of in the last half of last season, we kind of saw Tottenham drop off to the level of form that most people expected at the start of the season. That sort of run they had up until sort of October, November time last year really did propel them into the European places. But once after Christmas, their form was sort of more to that sort of 7th, 8th position that many expect them to be after Kane left. There's going to be a big test for them. I think both clubs would probably take the draw now. I kind of think the draw, sort of the result of the kind of, it's kind of mutually beneficial. Tottenham, they can both take the 5 points from their first 3 games and also not concede quite a big result to a rival team because they're going to be competing in similar positions this year. But I think Newcastle are going to win. I kind of feel like we've not performed yet. We've got a point to prove. We've not seen the best of Isak yet. He kind of does very well in this fixture. I think he scored 4 goals in this fixture across the last 2 seasons, so it's one that he enjoys. And when Tottenham sort of leave their centre-back as open as they do quite often, he's the type of player who's got that sort of one-on-one ability to take advantage. I'd expect Tottenham to have a lot of the ball. I'd expect them to have their chances, but I feel like on the break, that's when Newcastle we're our most dangerous. We might have Sandro Tonali in the midfield. We don't know how his return's going to go, but he's going to be available for this game. That could add a little bit of more quality that we perhaps lacked on the ball against Bournemouth. Yeah, I think I'm going to attempt Newcastle to win. I think I'm going to go for a 3-1. And we'll go 3-1. I kind of feel like this is a fixture we like and we do well in, and the style sort of suits us, especially at home when we've got the crowd as well. So yeah, I'm going to go for the 3-1 Newcastle, but I also think one of these seasons Tottenham are gonna get that revenge that they've kind of been thinking about for a while. So I wouldn't be surprised at any result here. I think they're all in play, but I'll back my team. I'll go 3-1.
That would make for a spicy game and maybe some PTSD for Tottenham fans. If you envisage that going, Newcastle's way quite early on. But yeah, in terms of my prediction, I've got a 2-2 draw here. I think it's two teams that have shown they're susceptible to not giving a. I'm waiting for a full 90-minute performance, or at least even a 70-minute performance from both teams. Yes, Tottenham have had that 4-0 win against Everton, but it was against a very poor Everton side. I'm waiting to see that spark in either of these teams, sort of at the very least controlling a game, and being able to manage a game in a way that I would start to believe that, okay, these are the two teams, or whichever one of them emergent, this is the one that is going to be in that coveted Champions League spot, trying to hold off all the others coming along. If you are of the belief that it is Arsenal, Man City, and Liverpool that will hold on to those top three spots, but I know that's not the prediction for many people. But yeah, I've gone 2-2 here, Jake. I think both teams are susceptible to conceding, and I can see from a Tottenham perspective them giving Newcastle some issues with the press, and especially if Newcastle continue to be sloppy at the back with the ball. And then equally from the Newcastle perspective, I think Isak could have quite a key game in this one. But yeah, let's move on to the last game, Man United versus Liverpool. I've gone 3-1 to Liverpool here, and I implore Liverpool not to get dragged down to Man United's level. I think Liverpool are the better team. I think they're the better coach team. We know what Man United are going to want to do. They're going to sit back and they're going to try and break on the counter-attack, get the ball to Bruno Fernandes early, and he will try and distribute it out wide to the Garnachas of the world, to the Amads of the world. I think Liverpool are better set up to deal with that in a slot system, a lot more conservative and not giving up as many chances in transition, and not as open as what we saw under Klopp. Maybe the Klopp system was a little bit more impatient, trying to be direct and some of the risky passes that they would play when the team isn't defensively set up to deal with that. So yeah, I think if Liverpool just play their game, don't get dragged into, oh, this is a derby, let's turn this into a scrap. Just play above Man United, which I think they're capable of doing. I can see them going and winning this game comfortably. And yeah, I've got a 3-1 prediction here.
Yeah, this would be a good game to watch. Manchester United always seem to pick themselves up for these types of games. So, and I think they've definitely been better at the start of the season. They were very unlucky with at Brighton. They should have went 2-1 up. Obviously, the goal was rightfully disallowed, but it was just quite a comedic error to have somebody on the goal line that the ball hit to be offside. It's quite unlucky. Most times they get a goal there, you've got the ball roll side to the side, or Xerxes already in the net. So that was quite unfortunate, and you probably think if they'd have went 2-1 up, they would have won the game. So yeah, it's going to be a massive test of them, against the team that is very good. In Liverpool, we know they've started well under Slot, and yeah, it'll be a good game for them. That will show where they are. They've beaten Ipswich. They kind of struggled in the first 45 minutes there. They've beaten Brentford, but we don't quite know where Brentford are going to be this season. So it's an early test of Slot as well. I think I'll sit on the fence there. I think I'm going to go for a 2-2. I think it's going to be a good game. I can see Manchester United getting some luck, doing quite well against the Liverpool defence. I could see Fernandes having a big game, but yeah, I think I'm not sure they have enough to win it. So I'll go 2-2. But yeah, it should be an entertaining one.
An entertaining game, definitely, and especially that Sunday, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, Spurs, and Man United versus Liverpool. Wow. That would be quite fantastic. Jake, that is going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. Do you have anything you want to plug, put over, or promote before we wrap up?
No, nothing major at the moment. You can get everything I do on my Twitter page, so at Jake Jackmann with 2 N's. Yeah, I do a lot of posting over there. So yeah, give that a follow.
And if Newcastle do sign someone big, definitely go and check out Jake's account, where I'm sure he'll be dancing on the graves of many a fan that have been in his mentions throughout this offseason. No, I'm joking. Jake. I don't know. Maybe Jake would you, Jake? Would you go and start screenshotting some of the posts that you received recently?
No, I'd never go to those. Never get to those levels.
I didn't expect it. But guys, go and check out all the content on the EPL Index website. There are match previews, post-match reviews, player performances, all the news that you guys could wish for, especially as we're heading towards the end of this transfer window. Obviously, go check out the daily podcast show. It's the Two-Footer podcast with Dave Hendrick, which comes out throughout the week. He will be discussing all of the hot topics all around the English Premier League. Finally, also go check out the new flagship show that comes out on Sunday evenings. It's called The Final Whistle Podcast, where Nina and Ben will be hosting guests as they look back on the weekend of EPL football. So we obviously usher in the Premier League fixtures for the game week. They close it off on the Sunday evening. Follow this show on the Twitter page at A Tad Predictable. Follow at EPL Index on Twitter. Subscribe to EPL Index podcast channel on your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars. Write some positive comments. That stuff really does go a long way. I've been Tadiwa Chanakira. You can find me on the Twitter handle at Tad Predicts. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA. And Jody, she's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. He's been Jake Jackmann at Jake Jackmann with 2 N's on Twitter. And remember, Chisinga Perry, Chinoshura.
What a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne! And it is Wood-Prowse. Martinelli forward. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again. And City have won the Premier League.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.